Well, hello, nerds. Let's let that focus on my face there real quick, shall we? This is the first John Leguizamo panel from DiNK Denver. He did two panels. This was the general access panel. The other panel we're going to post is the VIP panel, so you are getting VIP exclusive stuff like 3 weeks after the fact, but still. So yeah, this is the first John Leguizamo panel. This episode is brought to you by patreon.com/generallynerdy. Go check out the Patreon. You can jump on for just $1 a month. There are more tiers if you feel so generous. Otherwise, enjoy the panel.
Quiet on the set. Rolling.
Hi, I am Bitsy Telek.
Hey, I'm Hale Appleman.
I'm Walter Kane.
I'm Rene Aubergenois. Odo on Deep Space Nine.
Michael Dorn, Lieutenant Commander Worf, Star Trek The Next Generation.
Come and see me and hear me and talk to me and listen to me talk about myself.
Hey man, this is Kevin Smith, often considered generally nerdy, and you are listening to what is often considered generally nerdy.
On Generally Nerdy.
You're listening to
Generally nerdy.
Generally nerdy.
Generally nerdy.
Did anyone get tickets to Moulin Rouge tonight at Alamo? Nice, yes. It's completely sold out. Moulin Rouge at the Alamo Drafthouse with John Leguizamo. Please give a very, very warm Denver welcome to someone who at one point was considered the Latino Al Pacino, John Leguizamo.
That was self-proclaimed by myself. I tried to spread that rumor.
And you did it. Congratulations.
I am the Latino Al Pacino.
Yeah. How's your time in Denver been so far?
Awesome. I'm trying to stay hydrated so I don't, get the altitude sickness. But it's all good. I got a pamphlet for,
For all the drugs you're going to do?
for all the THC I can take.
Great, awesome. Thanks so much again for taking the time to come out to DiNK. Thanks for taking the time to come out to the Alamo Drafthouse.
Thanks for having me.
So I wanted to talk about almost everything, So
let's go for it.
I think the panel is about 4 hours long, so we're gonna be here for a while.
What is it, deposition or?
Exactly. So I know, right now, upstairs you have a lot of copies of your book Ghetto Clown, which recently was on HBO also.
Oh, was?
What's that?
Oh, cool. I didn't get a check.
You didn't get a check? Can someone check on that? Is that from HBO here? We got to get John some money. But I wanted to go back, all the way back. Tell us about your formative, your childhood years, and then kind of lead into when you said the arts were the thing that I want to be a part of. Like, this is going to be my world.
It is going to be 4 hours, okay? Because I'm a little past half century. I'm an immigrant. My parents came here during the Great Plantain Famine in Latin America, and I'll wait for y'all. And we ended up in Jackson Heights, Queens. Growing up, and we were like the first Latin family, so we started the white flight. And that's, when white people leave the neighborhood. And so I got beat up a lot, by all kinds of different groups. It was great, Irish, Italian, Jews, even my own people beat me up. But it kind of weirdly prepared me for Hollywood in a weird way. All that rejection and difficult times at home and in the neighborhood kind of prepared me for the rejection of Hollywood. When I got to Hollywood, being rejected and kind of overlooked didn't bother me. It didn't hurt me because I was kind of used to that sort of rejection. But being from the hood and growing up the way I did, we had a lot of gangs in New York City back in the day. The Latin Tops. I know they sound more like a singing group, but they were really tough. And the Spiral Sisters, they could kick your ass too. They were good looking and could kick your ass. And
this is an episode of Soul Train, right?
Basically. When you're from the hood and you're from underprivileged backgrounds, it's really hard to know that you're worth something unless somebody intervenes and tells you you're worth something. And luckily for me, I had a lot of mentors, and there were a lot of programs that really helped you get people who can tell you that. And my math teacher, Mr. Zufa, once said to me, you know, he was like, Mr. Leguizamo, if they can make penicillin out of moldy bread, they can make something out of you, Mr. Leguizamo. And
That was your math teacher?
my math teacher, who I stay in touch with, because, you know, he was one of the first people to believe in me. And I started pursuing my acting career, because I felt like, you know, I wanted to be an artist. I knew there weren't anybody who looked like me, because when I told my father I was going to be an actor, he was like, we didn't come to this country for you to be worse than us, you know? But, you know, anything my father was for, I was going to be against. So when he said he was against acting, then I was going to be more for it.
Did you eventually win him over, or did that not happen? Like, did he ever come to your side and be like, you know what, I was wrong?
No. I mean, when he saw Casualties of War was my first big movie with Pacino and Michael J. Fox, he goes, you were okay. You did a lot of bad things, a lot of good things. I was like, thanks, Dad. That was my big break. I appreciate it.
So supportive.
Yeah, unconditional love.
Yeah.
Not. But, you know, that's what led me to write my own stuff, too.
Right.
The rejection of Hollywood, sort of all the difficulties I had. I started writing because I couldn't. I was, you know, I went to NYU. I studied hard. I tried to get rid of my New York accent. This is not the way I sounded when I grew up, though. This is the improved version.
Let's talk about that a little bit. You know, so you have an immense career in the theater world. You know, and you know, we were talking earlier. You know, for me, you know, I was a theater kid in high school, and for me, Spicorama was huge. You know, like we took monologues from that all the time, and you know, I'm pretty sure at least one of my finals involved Spicorama in some sense. You know, what got you into, you know, the absurdist and then kind of like the one man show? Like, what attracted you to that? Aside from wanting to, you know, tell your story, you know, what was it about that area of the art world that really you know, struck a chord with you?
Well, you know, basically because being a Latin man in this country, I felt kind of invisible. You know what I mean? I didn't see myself and my people reflected the way I saw them. You know, the really smart, funny, intellectual, beautiful people I saw, I never saw in film. You know, so it was like, or in the media, or in novels, or in my history textbooks. So I felt like I needed to write something for my people, for myself as a young man, and so I started writing my own stuff, and I started doing it in New York City, and the place that I felt really comfortable with wasn't the comedy clubs, because it was all set up joke, and it just wasn't my thing, and it was the avant-garde world downtown, where you know, New York City was very broke and disheveled and dirty, and it's the perfect breeding ground for art. And I'm talking about the 80s, and there was all these artists. It was Eric Bogosian, I'm not sure if you're familiar with him, and Spalding Gray, and Reno, and Michael Mayer, this big Broadway director. Everybody was performing, and I could go there and tell my stories the way I wanted to, you know, with a lot of emotion, anger, raw. I didn't have to have set up joke, but I could still do my comedy stuff because I love comedy, and I wanted to infuse it with comedy.
Did your parents ever come to any of your shows?
Yeah, well, my mom's always been a big supporter of me, and the rest of my family. You know, it's like a Latin family, so you know, my cousins, my aunt, my grandfather, everybody would come to these, you know, the Lower East Side, LES, you know, it'd fill up the front row.
So like going from there into, you know, something like Ghetto Clown. Like Ghetto Clown was your first foray into graphic novels, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And there's also, I mean, to pat myself on the back,
do it.
I felt, you know, first of all, my humor, I have a right to do that. You know, I feel like I really helped change the humor in America in a lot of ways, because I brought a lot of Latin humor, which was much more long storytelling as opposed to set up joke. It's always like a long story with a lot of characters, and then there's a lot of humor along the way, and then there's a punchline. But it's always, you got to go through a long ride. And that kind of influenced me, and also a lot of drama and a lot of emotions. When I started Freak and Mambo Mouth and Spikorama, there was always a lot of really hard issues, a lot of drama within the jokes. And so then you get people like Louis C.K. borrowing from that self-expose, the autobiographical aspects of the comedy that I was doing. And then with Ghetto Clown, I was trying to crack, nobody had cracked the career paradigm. How do you tell your own story about your career? And it took me 10 years to crack that paradigm, so you don't sound like, so it doesn't sound, I know there's kids here, I was trying to think of different words. Masturbatory, you know.
Self-involved.
Right.
Yes.
Like, yeah. You know what I mean.
Yeah. Who
Hope they don't.
Who would you consider like your, you know, you mentioned people like Spalding Gray,
yeah,
and Louis C.K. I mean, like, who else would you consider, you know, your contemporaries and people that maybe you thought, you know, you had a kinship with?
Well, they were my forefathers, my founding forefathers.
You think?
Spalding Gray, yeah. Obviously Richard Pryor,
right.
Lenny Bruce,
yeah.
Lily Tomlin, Whoopi Goldberg. Did I say Eric Bogosian? Eric Bogosian was very important because Eric Bogosian brought the anger and the sex to one-man shows. And Whoopi Goldberg brought the ghetto and the poetry, and Lily Tomlin brought sort of the theatricalness of it. And then I took a little bit of everybody's and created my own hybrid, which became the autobiographical play.
Yeah. So, like, who else do you think, you know, was, you know, I mean, was anyone, you know, in your opinion, trying to do what you were doing? Did you feel like you were coming up with anyone at the same time? You know, was there anyone?
I mean, the comics, you know, I was on the other side of town, you know, downtown, which was the avant-garde section, and everybody else was uptown at the comedy clubs. You know, Chris Rock, Adam Sandler, all those cats were doing their stuff at their spot, and I was doing my thing downtown in my spot, which was very different.
Right. Yeah. Do you feel like that was because of? I mean, again, was it an ethnic thing? You know, was it just the way that New York was? Was it?
No, it wasn't an ethnic thing because these avant-garde was very white.
Yeah.
I was always the only Latin person, or the only person of color usually. Right. Reno's Puerto Rican. She was there sometimes too. But they found me, I found them, and I found a kindred spirit there. You know, a chance to really tell stories that outside of the box. You know, doing them in a very different way than anybody else was doing.
So going back to the masturbatory stuff, why?
Well, you are young. You're like just out of puberty. That's why.
Yeah, I'm 12.
He looks 15.
I've never kissed anyone.
Oh, you better work on that.
Maybe. Like, why? You know, why a decade? You know, like what? Like,
a decade for what?
For like you said, like, you know, it took like 10 years for you to really, like, you know, crack the nut on Ghetto Clown. Yeah.
Because everybody was trying. Kirk Douglas tried it. There was a lot of people trying to crack the telling your career story, but it comes out very, you know, like I said before, it's a very difficult genre to get right because you have to be completely honest. You can't be sort of honest or kind of honest. You have to be, otherwise it's boring. And people can't relate to it. So I had to reveal a lot of very difficult things, and you know, I talked about my nervous breakdown, and you know, the imposter syndrome, all these things, all these issues that happen to a lot of people of color, you know, especially because you feel like you represent everybody, and then you feel like, oh, I have to be perfect, and then that's what happens to Cat Williams and Martin Lawrence and David Chappelle. You perfect can't be.
Let's dive into that a little bit more. I mean, like, what, if you can, you know, maybe elaborate on some of the specific issues. You know, you mentioned something like, you know, imposter syndrome and things like that. Yeah. Like, what were?
Well, I don't know if anybody knows what imposter syndrome is. Yeah. Okay. Oh, it's a smart crowd here in Denver.
But yeah, like, so
do
like,
kids know what imposter syndrome is?
They're learning a lot today. Yeah,
they're going to be writers.
Great.
Or critics.
They're sitting right up front. Yeah, talk a little bit about, you know, what were some of the things that really were, you know, maybe one or two things that you really struggled with to find the truth and find the authenticity in, and be like.
What do you mean about?
Like in terms of, like, you know, like something, anything from imposter syndrome to something else that you were trying to say, like, I have to be honest about this, and it's difficult for me to be honest about this.
Well, you have to talk about your failures. I mean, you have to expose yourself in a way that's very against being a celebrity, being successful, is revealing your flaws, your faults, your failures, and focusing mostly on that, because that's more of the honesty of what goes on. You have to reveal the tricks, the pain, and all that stuff. So that's what I talked about. You know, all the fights I had with Patrick Swayze and Tu Wong Fu that were kind of unfortunate. Rest in peace. You know, being too hot-headed and too arrogant, working on Carlito's Way with Pacino, and you know, all those stories. I had to tell my culpability at it, because at the time I thought they were the problem, not me. And then, you know, with time and age comes wisdom, and you start to realize, oh, I had a lot to do with those difficult conflicts of interest.
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about the you know, your film career. So, like, you know, tonight we're showing Moulin Rouge. My first choice was going to be Super Mario Brothers.
I know.
I just
I like Super Mario Brothers now.
Yeah, no, I think it's.
I do. Now with age, I'm more forgiving.
Well, because like Charlie, you know, from DiNK, we were talking. We were like, you know, what should we show? Obviously, we want to show, you know, the Ghetto Clown special, and we weren't able to do that.
I know, that's what I really wanted to show, but we couldn't get the rights.
Yeah, it would have been amazing. Again, if someone from HBO is here, let's talk. But like, you know, I think like a movie like Super Mario Brothers at this point has now like crossed over into the cult and like genre. You know, in terms of like, you know, repertory programming, it's kind of a big deal now. But of course, you've had an amazing, you know, varied career. You've worked with, you know, Baz Luhrmann. Twice. You know, you worked with Spike Lee a lot. Twice.
How the twice guy. Yeah. That's a good sign.
That
the directors love me, so they work with you again. The lead actors, not so much.
Yeah. How was working with Spike Lee?
Oh my God, incredible. I mean, doing Summer of Sam and Freak. And it was just, I mean, he's an actor's director, and he gives you total freedom. Even though he helped create the script, he didn't write Summer of Sam.
Right.
He gave it a polish. Michael Imperioli from the Gandolfini TV series wrote it.
Sopranos.
Yes, Sopranos. Chris, the character Chris. He wrote Summer of Sam about the David Berkowitz incident, and so Spike, I mean, he just gives you the room, man, and he made us all hang out, very method, and Adrian Brody, myself, and Mira Sorvino became really tight, really close, and you know, that scene I had with her when I'm having a coke raging fit and we're breaking up, and you know, I was really throwing things and breaking things, and Spike's in the corner going, yeah. He loved it, more, you know, and I would do more and more. It was like, but we got to go to Cannes for the first time. That was my first Cannes visit.
How was it?
Oh, dude, it was everything everybody thought. You know, it's the pinnacle of festivals. Yeah. You go there and, you know, because the French are very French. You know, they'll tell you what they really think, not like the rest of us who, you know, will come up with some cute little lie. They won't. Like, if they don't like your movie, they'll slam their theater seats and go, "Ah, qui sacre bleu, dégueulasse bordel."
I was telling you earlier, my boss, who's in the audience, is on the team of that you were robbed for not getting the Oscar for Summer of Sam.
Your boss is a very astute man.
Anyone else on the team that John was robbed for Summer of Sam? We're gonna watch it later. It's fine.
for the kids' special screening of Summer of Sam.
So let's think more into Ghetto Clown. You know, so again, this was your first foray into, you know, graphic novelization. You know, why choose that medium?
Well, you know, I was very inspired by this graphic novel called Persepolis. I'm not sure if you're familiar with it, but it's a masterpiece, and I was so moved by it. And then I saw the possibilities of a graphic novel that I'd never seen before, how I could really capture reality. You know, and I was like, wow, I can't believe I'm crying in reading a graphic novel, and because it's very hard for lay people to read plays and stuff like that, and because Ghetto Clown travels through so much, it's my whole life, so birth, you know, coming of age, you know, all that stuff. And in so many countries and so many things, I thought the graphic novel could really render that and make it accessible to somebody who doesn't read screenplays or plays.
Did you find, you know, or I guess what were the frustrations and kind of things that you might have experienced that, you know, you maybe hadn't experienced in another art form that you did with graphic novels?
Well, you know,
kind of like the
I think it
formation
was mostly time that was like the enemy, I think, of the graphic novel. It's just time, because the artists were fantastic. They have this Brooklyn community of graphic novel artists, illustrators, pencilers, you know, the whole crew. And I auditioned a lot of people by looking at their work. And so when I found Christina Cassano and Seamus Viale, he's Native American, by the way, I gave them all my photos, I gave them all the addresses of all the locations, and she did her research. They both did their research. And when I look at the book, I was like, oh my God, she really captured it, but not just like a photograph reality, but a little more, like the soul of what was really going on.
She got it.
She got it, man. She got it. I was so impressed with it.
Yeah.
Just that we didn't have time, you know. Everything was, we were always late, always behind, you know.
And are you satisfied with like the end result? I mean,
Yeah, I love it. I'm so proud of it. But it was Eisner nominated. I'm not sure if you know what that is, but it's the Oscars of graphic novel.
Yeah, you guys don't know what the Eisners are, right? No.
Well, I didn't know what it was, so
Really?
I assume nobody else did either. Not even Eisner.
Yeah, no, I have no idea. Are you gonna? Do you think you'll ever do another one? I mean, do you at least even if it's planned right now? I mean, like if you were given the opportunity, you
Yeah. I've been talking to Andrew, who wrote March and Run, talking about doing a graphic novel together. I don't know if you saw March. It's about John Lewis and the March to Selma with Martin Luther King. It's a work of art.
Does anyone have any questions from the audience?
I'm going to open up to you. He's got a question right there.
Right here.
After completing Get Out Loud, you revealed so much about your personal life. Do you feel like you had a sort of cathartic experience with either its release or possibly even afterward when it was more accepted on the whole?
Definitely, during the process of it, I definitely felt that I came to terms with a lot of demons, personal demons, and the embarrassment of a lot of the failures, because, you know, putting it out there at first, I was like, oh my God, you know, it's embarrassing to you, and it makes you look, I guess, you know, not special. You're not special. You're not, you know, you got a lot of problems, and putting out my, you know, that I was kind of difficult to work with. Maybe that's why I do one-man shows, because.
Is that it?
No. Maybe, I don't know. But it definitely helped me heal. I feel like it took me. I felt like just putting it out there, because I think that's what art is, isn't it? It's a way for the artist to play God with his trauma, and you work with your trauma. And you know, most works are really in some ways autobiographical, even though they're not autobiographical. You got to put yourself into it, and that's what people feel.
Aside from maybe the Get a Clown and the one-man shows, you know, especially with maybe some of your film roles, I mean, was there anything else where you really felt like this is a character, or this is something I'm going to do that I am going to use to heal myself?
I mean, it's always usually my work that does, like my last one, Latin History for Morons. Yeah, because I was one of the morons too, because I didn't know about all the history. I was talking about my son being bullied at school, and how difficult those 2 years were for us. And so that became the genesis of that, the last play I just did on Broadway. But the beautiful thing about it was that in the writing of it and helping my son, I was the one that grew. I was the one that was healed. I was the one that stopped feeling like a second-class citizen. With the amount of information that I found out there was amazing. Like, I can't believe that this information wasn't in textbooks. When I found out that, first of all, which is obvious, that we Latin people are the second oldest ethnic group in America after Native Americans, that we're the only ethnic group that has fought in every single war America has ever had. We're the most decorated minority in each and every war. And I'm talking about American Revolution. I'm talking about French Indian American War. I'm talking about War of 1812. I know nobody cares about that war, but we were there anyway. War of 1860. 10,000 unknown Latino patriots fought in the American Revolution out of a total of 80,000 troops. You know, General Bernardo Galvez was like the George Washington of Louisiana, Mississippi, and Pensacola, and Florida. And he had 3,000 troops of Puerto Ricans, Cubans, Mexicans, Native Americans, and freed slaves, and they kicked the British all out of that southern area. And he gave George Washington $70,000 worth of weapons. Yeah. Cuban women in Virginia sold their jewelry to feed the patriots. So we, too, are the sons and daughters of the American Revolution. Yeah. So all this information that I found made me so proud, and I can feel the audiences leaving the theater feeling prouder than ever to be Latin, especially in these sort of dark times. Yeah.
Other questions? Right there.
Do you prefer live acting over film acting, and why?
Good question. I mean, I love film acting too, man. I don't want to have to choose between the two, because I do love independent films, that character-driven storytelling. I'm not a big fan of the high-concept rides. But theater, I mean, theater is like a conversation with the audience. It's the most authentic I can be, the most honest I can be, and the audience is there too. I mean, they instantly respond if something is working, not working, if they're moved. I can hear people sniffling and crying. I can hear them laughing. I can hear them bored. You know, you can hear them, get up and walk. So it's a very honest form that can be really inspiring. I mean, every night is new. Every night is fresh. I keep rewriting till the very end until they pull me off the stage. It's a very powerful event that after I just finished, it's a little postpartum. I do feel a little weird. I feel a little let down. After can't go on stage and have that connection every day.
Yeah. Other questions? Right here.
This is about the movie Chef.
Yeah.
So preparing for that, did you work in kitchens, or like how was that? Because that's, to me, it was the most inspiring movie of my life. Like I've been chef for 2 years now.
Oh wow, man! Awesome! Congratulations.
I had no career path, I was lost, and then at the time my girlfriend had brought me to watch that movie.
Yeah.
Completely flipped my life around. Like I got off antibiotics and stuff like that.
Oh, good for you, man.
And I moved on, and then like, man, thank you for being the only Latino role model in my entire
Oh,
life.
thank you,
I was
brother.
22, bro.
From the BX in the house. He said that Chef was a movie that helped, and that's what art can do, man. That's what made me fall in love with acting and playwriting and screenwriting and writing, and is that when I was a young man, that's what plays and movies and comedians did for me. They helped me through the hard times of my life, and I didn't feel alone, and I felt hope. And art helps you to see other people that you may not relate to and empathize. I mean, it's a beautiful thing. And yes, I did study in a kitchen, and no matter how long I would have studied, I would have still sucked as a chef. Because I did a month in one kitchen in a restaurant in New York, and it was terrifying, man. It was so, I mean, everything was so hot, everything was sharp, everybody moved so fast.
8 minutes fast.
Yeah, dude, it was. And then we had a chef, Roy Choi, as a consultant every day. So not only were we eating great, we were really being authentic, And I mean, obviously Jon Favreau, he gained quite a bit. I mean, because he was in the role, he was into the role. And I gained a couple pounds, but I wasn't as into it as he was. But yeah, working with Jon, I mean, what you see in that movie, that is Jon Favreau. He's that generous, he's that nurturing, he's so creative. He wrote it, starred in it, directed it. I mean, the music is so beautifully edited to the action. I mean, you've never seen a movie done like that, edited right to the music. And, we try to be as authentic to that story, which is that kind of Roy Choi's story, that he was lost and he was floundering, and then his career crashed, and so he got on a food truck. And his food truck, that's how he reinvented himself.
Great question. Other questions? Right there.
What or who inspired you to play Chi-Chi into
Which one? Thank you. Yeah, I was definitely a boy in a dress and other things to help me look good in a dress. that were not so comfortable. Well, I mean, Douglas Carter Bean, who wrote the screenplay, wrote this beautiful piece, and I mean, they did it right. You know, we did a lot of research. I went to all the drag queen performances in Times Square, were all black and Latin, and they did these elaborate performances and songs and dancing, and then they assigned us each a drag queen godmother. Mine was Puerto Rican. And Wesley's was black, and Patrick's was white, and you know, it was kind of obvious, but they helped us all, you know. And I spent a lot of time with Larissa Dumont, and you know, I borrowed a lot of her language and dialogue and behavior to create the character that I did in the movie. And you know, my character Chichi Rodriguez in the '90s became a transgender icon for teenagers, and I was very proud of that. Thank you.
Other questions? We're here.
Looking to your work that you did in ER, what was the difference in your career working on a primetime television show versus on screen?
You know, those kids, I don't want to curse. Those mofos earn their money. I mean, TV is really difficult, especially network TV. To do a show, 22 episodes a year, and the problem with ER was that they do 80 pages where everybody else does 50 pages. So you had to memorize extra dialogue. There was all doctor dialogue, you know, doctorese. You know, I did my research. I went to a hospital in the Valley for a month, but you know, I can only get an idea of the career. I can't really operate on anybody or cook a meal. I'm lucky I got into acting because not much I can do. But I love research, you know, I'm very method. And it was hard, it was really hard, but it was exciting. The writing was incredible. They custom fit the character to me, and they would let me have a lot of input. It was just, you know, they like to do 10-minute takes. I had massive amounts of dialogue that I had to get right, and there was one prankster on the set. I guess that was Clooney's doing, that he created these pranksters that are really annoying. Because I'm a perfectionist, so I like things to be perfect. So I had worked on these speeches so beautifully, you know, for hours, no sleep, never saw my family because it was long hours. And I had this long speech. I can't even remember half the dialogue. And it's 10 minutes, right? And I'm getting to the end, and I got to open up the medicine and give it to the patient. And I get to the end of it after, you know, GC a score of 5, and better get hematoma, get it with stat, and then I'm like, God damn it, I can't open the medicine. What the fuck? And they're like, Todd. I go, I can't open it, man. Somebody block it. And the other guy, no, you better not. I swear to God, I'm a funny man, but if you play that again, I swear. And of course, they can't stop.
No, yeah.
So then another big scene that day that I was prepared really well for, and I get to the end of it, and I got to call the person on the phone, and I put the phone to my ear, and it's full of Vaseline.
This is all Clooney's doing.
Yeah, because he started this prankster stuff, I guess, to relieve the tension. It was making me more tense.
An adverse effect.
Yeah, they didn't stop. They kept going, too. I had pulled gloves out that same day with another long scene. And when I pulled the surgical glove out, they had tied the whole string.
I think we have time for one or two more questions.
They realized not to joke with
me.
They realized I'm not funny when I'm working.
No. Right here.
I'm a big Moulin Rouge fan, and I want to know, how did you get the inspiration to play Toulouse-Lautrec? Because you were just brilliant.
Oh, thank you. You know, it's coming to Broadway. They're testing it right now in Boston, and I think it's fast tracking it for 2019. I think it's going to be a great. It's a natural, you know, to become a Broadway musical. What I did for it, you know, I read everything I could. I saw every photograph of Toulouse-Lautrec, and you know, I just tried to use everything I read about him. I read that, you know, he was the product of two first cousins. That's why he was born sort of vertically challenged. And because he was the product of two first cousins, his lips were cartilaged a little bit in his tongue, so he lisped. He naturally lisped and drooled a lot because everything was. So I tried to use those characteristics to create his voice, and he was heartbroken. You know, he was in love with all these women who never his love was never requited. So you know, we tried to put that into the movie.
Anybody have one? This is the big one.
You're the closer.
Yeah. So through all this process of self-discovery and knowing yourself and being accepted for doing that, have you addressed your imposter syndrome? Have you been able to look back and say, "This is why Spike wanted me twice"?
Yeah. You know, I definitely. You know, I've been in therapy my whole life. You know, because I in high school they wouldn't let me back unless I was seeing somebody, because I was very disruptive, in a funny way, but still disruptive. Definitely, I think I come to terms with it. I think everybody struggles with that to some extent. That's why there's so much self-sabotage with artists. You know, it's not the work that messes you up; it's the success that messes you up. You know, because then you start believing that you're supposed to be special or better or important or fantastic all the time, and you're not. You're just a human being who likes this thing and does that thing well. But even that thing can come out bad and suck. And some people stop performing because they're afraid of failing, you know, and they stop working, you know. Frank Capra, he won that Oscar for It Happened One Night. This is back in early 1900s film. Well, he didn't do a film in 10 years because he was afraid of never meeting up to that. So yeah, no, I worked hard on it. I go to my therapist, Dr. T, and it's, you know, I'm a New Yorker and I'm neurotic and I accept it.
If you have more questions for John, just want to remind you, he's up on the third floor. You'll be around tomorrow as well?
Yes, I will.
All right, great. Thank you again so much for your time.
Thank you.
Please give another round of applause.
Sid's a hard word to say too, Sid. It's a loadish Sid. That's beautiful. Right now. Give Denver a cup.
Japanese subs slam two torpedoes into our side chief.